Hi, this is the kitchen we use for Team 15's process improvement project. And so I'm going to walk you through all the changes we made to improve our processes. And it's really exciting because we did make some really awesome changes that really improved our processes. So I'll go in order of how we go around the kitchen. And so first step is that our two main pots and pans that we use for almost all of our recipes. As you can see, we color coded them, and that is because each meal family that we have, we assigned a color. So pasta's red, our chicken stir fry chicken dishes are blue, and then our egg dishes are yellow. So this color coding helps us know which pan and which pot to use for which process to make it really easy, especially for anybody other than myself or someone on our team if they come in and need to make a dish. So when we initially started this, we thought we would just kind of stack these pots and pans maybe down here with all the other obscure pots and pans that we don't usually use. But then we realized that that would cause me to bend over, step to the side, place, and then do it again for however many pots and pans that we need. So instead, we decided to spend like literally 10 cents on command hooks to hang these up. And we actually even had to figure out how to hang them up because you can see there's a little hole here, but that hole won't fit on this command hook. So we actually cut a little piece of cord string and tied it. Cost us no money at all to hang these up. And then we decided, oh, we also need the lids because that is another step of our process that improves time and cooking. And so we realized that we can hang them. And then I practiced a few times and realized that the best way to grab these pots and pans when I'm about to use them is to grab the lid with my left hand and the pan on my right, because then I can just pick it up, slide it off. It's as easy as that, and then I place it on the stove. Once I place everything on the stove, that's when I start turning on the burners. Essentially, we realized that a lot of our time when we first started our process was wasted on waiting for food to heat up. Now, for an example, pasta, no matter how much we increase the time it takes to get to the water to boil, it's still going to take roughly 10 to 11 minutes for that pasta to cook. So we can't affect that time, but we can affect how long we wait for the water to boil. So we learned that if we turn on the burners first thing and place the pots, that works. And then for instance, when we use this pan to add water, we would quickly add water and then cover it with the lid. So that's another thing we changed. Before, we didn't use a lid for any of our heating processes, so a lot of heat was lost. The lid helps us trap it, which actually helps it cook longer and helps the water boil faster, for example. So that became our first step. So as you can see, I'm moving in kind of a U shape. So we're at the oven now. Once the burners are ready, I would then go to my first meal station. It's really cool. So we set it up because we do a lot of cutting and sorting when we're making each of our meals. And so this worked great for each of our meal families. What we have here is we have our cutting board, we have a towel, and then we have our knife. And the idea is that, let's say I'm cutting onions and then it gets like onion juice on the knife. I could essentially, once I'm done cutting my onions, then quickly wipe it on the towel rather than taking 3 steps to rinse it in the sink. So it does save us a lot of time. Our other fun improvement that we made was this child's bib catcher. So essentially, if you have a child and they're sitting in their high chair, sitting at the table, they're kind of messy, and so this invention was made to catch any food that would fall. So we are utilizing it instead. So I'm cutting celery, right? And there's the stalk of the celery that has the leaves that you don't eat, and then the end of the white part of the celery that you don't eat. Instead of picking up those food scraps and then walking over here and then having to lift this up, throw it away, instead I would just take those food scraps and scrape them into the bib catcher. So that way it requires no extra time during our process, and it's just really easy, and it's all here. So then after I'm done with my entire process and I'm cleaning up my stations, it's just a quick rinse down and wash and we're done. So that's one of my favorite things that we did. And then we also have our serving bowl. So for each meal that we have, except for the eggs, we have a bowl here. For the eggs, it would be a little plate. We would essentially keep that here, and then that just makes it easier once all the food is done cooking on the stove or we have everything chopped. We can then put it in the bowl and serve it right away. We don't have to open up anything to get that. So now let's focus on how we cleaned or organized our dry goods or goods that don't need to be refrigerated. Oh, and before I forget, we also, in all of our recipes, we use olive oil. And before we would have to take the olive oil, unscrew it, and then pour it, and then we didn't know how much was in there, and it would just take a while. So instead, we got this quick pour that like you would use at a bar for drinks. And essentially, it's 1 ounce per minute. So when I'm pouring, I know, oh, 2 seconds have gone, or 1 ounce per second, I'm sorry. So I know that once like 2 seconds go by, I know that about 2 ounces have come out of this. And so that was no cost at all. That was just utilizing something that might not necessarily be used for olive oil. So that saves a lot of time because I don't have to use 2 hands to open it up. Okay, so now on to the fun part. These are our product families of dry goods. And so before I get into that, I do want to note that before I would just store different food items on all different shelves and just kind of have to look for everything whenever I was cooking. In our original videos, I would actually have to go get a stool to reach anything up here because the shelf was too high. So when we cleared off all of our shelves, we actually realized that if you look at these little notches here, we can move the shelves at any height we'd like. So we actually moved this tall shelf down. And so coffee and other things that I kind of use on a daily basis, if they're kind of irregular, we put up here so I can still grab it, but it's not as important as my meal families that I make consistently. And so once we move this shelf down a little that I'm able to grab, we then based these 3 shelf heights on how tall our typical boxes are, because we wanted to make sure that they would fit, but we also don't want to waste any space that could be used for another shelf. So that's why this is perfect and this is perfect. And like I mentioned earlier, we did color code. So here's egg, here's our chicken stir fry dish, and then here is our pasta family. The different colors which correlate to what you see on these pans that I mentioned earlier. So that's just another way that we like to differentiate between those. When we then referred back to the meal log and we saw, okay, we know that these are the majority of our meals, but out of all 3 meal families, what's made the most? Because we thought it would make most sense to have whatever's made the most at eye distance, because I know I'd be grabbing it the majority of the time. And so after looking at that, we realized it would be our egg family. So that's why egg family's here, and then stir fry, and then pasta. So that's how we organize those. For both pasta and stir fry, there are specific directions that need to be followed so that the rice and the pasta can be made the right way. And we had to ensure that the right measurements and times were enforced too. And this is not only for me because it's hard to remember all these numbers, but it's also for anybody else who comes into this kitchen and needs to make something. And so here you'll see that for 1 serving of pasta, we have the directions, and then for 1 serving of rice, we have the directions. And so that's just another easy way for us to improve our process and our timing, so it doesn't require me to, get out a box and then quickly read the directions. Now I can easily see it when I take out my container. So the next fun step is that these are portable, and so when I know I am, for instance, making an egg dish, I would go ahead and I would grab what I need. So egg is an anomaly in the sense that we do have a loaf of bread that we kind of just put behind, but it's easy because the second you take out this, you know you need your bread. So it all kind of sits right here. In this, you'll see we have our labels for everything that we have. We have our sriracha, our sesame seeds, our avocados, and even some of our tomatoes. Tomatoes, it depends on the day. We can even include it in the refrigerator. And so, yeah, so that's a great example. And so these are little kanbans. So I know that this is kind of hard to measure. I can't necessarily have 2 sriracha bottles because it has taken me many, many, many months just to get this far down on this bottle. And so it's kind of, for whoever's in the kitchen, if you're at a few final drops that are good for a few final meals, that's kind of the time you know that you would need more. And so I would essentially take this little tag, slide it out, and then put it on my little grocery list. So you can see I already have the rice replenishment kanban here. Here, I'll put this in just for an example. But you'll see I already have the rice replenished kanban here because that one is pretty neat. That goes right here between one box and another box, because I know I go through rice very often. So I would essentially, once I lose one box, I know it's time to buy another. And so that's why that one's already there, because I know I need to buy another box of rice. So that's kind of seeing it in action, which is kind of fun. So these little combines just help us remember to buy certain goods. And so in some of our, like for instance, the brown rice and even the pasta, it goes at a certain position, so that way once we grab it, we see it and we know to add it to our grocery list. We also always keep this little bin here, so that way when I'm cutting avocado, boom, it can go on my plate or go wherever it needs to go, and then I can grab this. I don't have to keep reaching up or looking for anything. It's all right here. Everything I need to make my egg that is a dry good is right here. We also organize our plates and bowls. So before, the plates and bowls were like somewhere over here, I don't even remember, but that would require me, I'm cooking, oh, I need a bowl, or I need a serving plate, I need to come over here and get it, and then it would just cause me to go across the kitchen. Now it's right here, and it's even placed here before I even begin, so my setup time, I grab the plate or bowl from this stack here. It's also important to note that this pot is only used for chicken stir fry, so that's why it's up here. So again, you'll see pasta, stir fry, and then plates and bowls is white, not yellow, because it's used for everything, and we just thought white would be good because all of our dishware is white. So you'll see stir fry, this is blue because this pan is only used for stir fry, and so when we're making this, we set all these up, and then we also grab this pan and go here. And this one's just a little too heavy that a command hook wouldn't really work, but again, instead of putting it down here, we placed it up here on this shelf, so we know stir fry, we know we need it just for stir fry. We also know that for pasta, we need the colander because we gotta rinse our pasta once it's cooked in the boiling water, and so that's when we would pour it here. We would take it, and then we have to go across the kitchen, but the way our process works, and when you watch our video, it makes sense to keep it here rather than over on this side. And so when you watch our video, you'll see how that makes sense. It's hard to explain when I'm not going through an entire meal at one time. But again, that's why we labeled everything, and it makes the process pretty easy. It's also important to note that these spatulas and other items are used for many of our meals, and so that's why they're here rather than maybe stored in a messy drawer or under the sink or on another side of the kitchen. We keep it right here next to the oven so that they're easy to grab. And then it's also fun, we also have this fun little wooden guy that allows me, once this is kind of dirty, I know I can set it here and it won't get the rest of the table dirty. Because each of our meals use salt, pepper, and either spray or actual olive oil, that's why all of this is set out as well. We don't want to keep reaching out if we know we use it for every meal. And honestly, I use it for every meal outside of these meal families too, so that other 20%. So it's pretty convenient for me. So now we're going to move on to our refrigerated goods. So a lot of our, all of our meals actually have some products that need to be refrigerated and obviously can't be kept in the cabinet, so that's how we organize this refrigerator. So just like the shelves in the cabinet, we actually altered some of the shelves here. We moved one up, we moved some down. And so as you can see, again, we have this color coding, so we have the different bins. We have egg, we have stir fry, and we have pasta. And they also use the same Kanban. So I know that once something gets down a little, we can go ahead and add that to our grocery list. So if I'm making stir fry, I'll go ahead and walk around, and then I will grab the stir fry bin, and I will set it right here. And I'll talk about our taped lines in a second, but these lines help us know exactly where to set things. So you'll see even on this side we have it too, but I'll explain that in a few minutes once I'm done with this step. So these are our, this is just like the bins there, except they're different size and they house refrigerated items. So for example, for stir fry, we know we need carrots, celery, bell pepper, and mushrooms. So we have all these here. And again, it's hard to measure because you don't want to buy, I don't know, it's just kind of hard to measure how much of a bell pepper you need, for instance. But again, once I know, I can go ahead and grab the little Kanban and add it to my grocery list, so then I know, and then once I'm ready to go to the grocery store, I can then write it all on this piece of paper. I don't have to take all these little Kanbans with me. And then once I purchase them, I can then put them back. But this is how it is, and essentially how it would work is I would take out one stalk of celery, set it here, take out one carrot, take out a mushroom or two, and then take out a bell pepper, and rinse them all at once. So instead of doing rinse carrot, chop, 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 rinse celery, chop, 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 I would rinse all at once, so that limits the amount of times I move and limits the amount of time I turn the faucet on and off. Yes, so then once I would chop, we actually utilize different knives. And so before I used one serrated knife that it didn't make sense to just use that because it wasn't the type of cutting needed. So instead we used this curved type tip knife, and so essentially we also improved the way we cut. So what would happen is we would have a carrot here. Well, why don't I show you? We would have a carrot here. So after I would rinse off all my vegetables, so this is as if I rinsed off all the vegetables needed. What I would do is I would keep the tip down, cut that off, the end, and then cut this end off. See how the tip is staying down? And then I would slide that into our little bib here. So now I don't have to throw it away or throw it into the sink, it just goes right here. Then when I'm chopping, instead of moving my knife, which is kind of slow and a little dangerous actually, I would instead move the carrot this way while I'm chopping, and the tip never leaves the ground or never leaves the cutting board. So now you can see. So that makes it pretty easy and it's pretty efficient. Once my whole carrot's cut, I would then throw it into this bowl. So we'll pretend that whole carrot's cut. And then I would go on to the next vegetable that's sitting here, and also a little bit on the towel. I could also wipe off the knife on the towel. So before I go on to the next step in our little kitchen cell, I do want to point out how we make sure all of this is in the right spot. So if I move everything to the side for you, you'll see that we have taped out exactly where everything needs to go. So even for setup time, it's really fast. We know that this goes down first. It actually doesn't require any tape. It just kind of, the plastic kind of sits. So we know this goes down because there's the rectangle, and then the cutting board, and then the towel and bowl here with the knife on top. And then this is the perfect size for our narrow bin. So that kind of just helps us set it up really fast. You don't have to make sure everything's aligned. The tape measures it perfectly for us, which is really nice. And it's electrical tape too, so it sticks, but that won't leave any residue in case you ever have to move anything or change our process again, because processes are always evolving. So yes, so let's say this entire bowl is filled up with the vegetables, or in the case of the egg, the cilantro and the tomato, or in the case of the pasta, the spinach and the mushrooms. I would then take this bowl and bring it over here. And essentially we would just kind of set it, I kept setting it here because it's just, there's no other room for our coffee maker. It has to go here. So essentially having it right here, I know exactly where it goes. So that's kind of why that's not taped off. It would then go here. Once my pan is hot enough, so right during our process, at this point we timed it perfectly so that it would be hot enough with the oil, ready to cook anything. I would take off the lid, pour it all in, and then set my bowl here. So that makes it really quick. It's really nice because it just cooks it evenly. As you can see, the kitchen is very small, so we made it into a cell so that I start here, and as I went through this video today, I walk like this. There are a few instances where maybe, for instance, the egg meal in this narrow container, there is the eggs. Those are just cracked right here at the pan. So I would still stay in this cell. I would just grab this, and it would go right where the bread is, crack the egg real quick, and then carry it here. So it's never once I go back and forth. It's one large cell, which is really nice. Then once everything's done, I'm able to take whatever pan. So the final pan that's always used. So we know that when all the sauces are mixed or whatever it may be, or all the veggies are there or whatever it may be, there's always this large burner because it's the closest to the station. So essentially whatever pan is here, I would grab it, and all of the meals already use a spatula intermittently, so it would be right here. So I would grab the spatula, grab this. Before I even grab the spatula, I would actually move this bowl onto the cutting board and scrape everything, and then it would be ready. So you'll see in every meal that we worked on, we end the video with me going like this with a plate or whatever it may be because it's all right here. So essentially we do go in a circle and we end up right back where we started. Yeah, before this project we didn't know what would work and what wouldn't, but after a lot of trials, whether it be with, before we would use this and it would just take forever to take it off and spray, you never knew when. We now use this only. Knowing where to place the pots, knowing what kanbans work best. I think initially we thought it all had to be based on a certain numerical value. We now realize that sometimes kanbans, especially with fresh produce, you kind of just have to know. And someone like me who cooks these meals all the time, I know when I need to buy more tomatoes or buy more avocados. That being said, it doesn't necessarily, just because I know, doesn't mean I'll remember to put it on my grocery list and go buy it. And so that's why these kanbans really work for me. And while I'll keep these in my kitchen even after this project, because I know that I'll always have them on my grocery list here. And so that's one of my favorite parts. Overall, this was a really fun project. I didn't know if I would actually keep these improvements in my kitchen, but now I know I definitely will, because I do make these meals all the time. So thank you so much.
I represent Team 15 for the Supply Chain Process Improvement Project. We chose to improve the processes for the 3 most common meals prepared in our kitchen. Our first step was to film the original processes for these meals and take notes, and we immediately noticed some unnecessary waste throughout the process. Firstly, the cook regularly spent time looking for specific utensils because there was no standardized storage method in place. Also, we stored dry goods like pasta and rice on the top shelf of the pantry, just because that's where they've always been kept, and storing them there means that the cook needs to retrieve a stepping stool from the laundry room each time to retrieve them. This one detail alone accounted for an extra 28 steps and 35 seconds in each of our processes. Another waste that we noticed was that the cook regularly walked across the kitchen to grab utensils, simply because they were stored separately from where the value-added work took place. And the last waste that I wanted to highlight here is that it was very common for our cook to wait for a timed process to complete, doing nothing when she could have changed the order of her process and completed some value-added activities during that waiting time. Our second step was to document the wastes of our process and try to fix them with 5S strategies. We started by removing every item from our kitchen and sorting them by meal family and usage level. We also straightened our process by doing things like adjusting shelf heights to match the contents that would go in them. While the kitchen was completely empty, we made our kitchen shine by doing a top-to-bottom clean. This makes it easier for us to notice something that's out of place and will give our kitchen a positive atmosphere while doing work. Next, we straightened our process by making sure only essential items remained on our countertop, and this gave us room to create cutting stations on each side of the kitchen, with children's bibs under each cutting board to act as a food catcher. This removed waste by removing the need to walk cutting scraps to the trash can. We also added tools to our process, like bartender speed pourers, which removes the need to measure liquids and is great for things like olive oil. To standardize our process, we created meal baskets for each meal family, and we color-coded them throughout our process. Yellow for egg, red for pasta, and blue for stir-fry. We added these colors to our pans, our dry meal kits, our cold meal kits, and our Kanban inventory management cards. These Kanban indicators are located in each meal basket and act as restock signals when added to a clipboard with a grocery list. The last part of our 5S is sustain, and one of the long-term implementations that we did was to train our cook how to sharpen knives and how to properly cut vegetables. Both of these things help improve speed and safety when cutting in the kitchen, and they also create an atmosphere where the worker is involved in the lean process. Our final step was to add all of these ideas together and create a better process. After analyzing our original videos, we noticed that much of our waste was coming from walking across the kitchen. To fix this, we created a circular process with cells for each stage of the cooking process. Our first step was to get the pots and pans on the stove and turn on the oven. This made it so we weren't waiting for the pans to heat up later. Next, we gather the appropriate dry meal basket and cut items that don't need washing. Next, we gather the appropriate cold meal basket from the fridge and cut those items on the sink side cutting station. Lastly, after the items are cut, we bring the items to the stove and cook them over heat. This circular process works for all of our meal families and saves a significant amount of time. Here are a few clips of our final process, and pay close attention to her movement throughout the kitchen and her use of all of the tools that we mentioned in this video, like the bibs under the cutting stations and the speed pourers, etc.